Today's presentation is the eVerge technical review. Hi, my name is Daryl Sorensen. I'm the technical support lead for Vertex standards. In this presentation, we're going to set a scenario and add an objective. And with that objective in mind, we're going to first fleet map in analog the operations and program it to the radio. And after that, add additional features. After doing that, then we're going to take the same scenario and apply it and fleet map it for digital operation and program. Then after doing that, we'll program the radio, and after having it programmed, we'll go ahead and go over additional systems like scan, privacy, emergency, ARTS2, and lastly, documentation. So first off, we've got our scenario, which is a school using one repeater and 11 radios. And with that, we have an objective to have each group in that school communicate with the identification of the individuals and be broken up into 3 different groups. The groups would be administration, teachers, maintenance, and you'll have 3 administrators, 5 teachers, and 3 maintenance. Alright, now we'll go ahead and fleet map this. First off, we'll fleet map the users. We have them listed first by group and then by the individuals of that group. So our first group is admin, and we have admin 1, admin 2, admin 3, and so on for teachers and maintenance. And we have the transmit receive frequency of our repeater, so you can see this by each of our groups. And we're going to subdivide each of our groups using sub-audio. For this exercise, we're going to use CTCSS. And we're now going to use MDC 1200 to assign individual IDs to each of the users, and MDC 1200 secondary for your groups. Alright. Now we're going to go ahead and talk about programming the radio. The first step, we're going to introduce the software of the EVX radios, and then go into loading names, narrowband, sub-audios, and frequencies. After that, we'll register the RF list in the group list, and lastly, we'll set up MDC 1200. So here we go. This is what our EVX software looks like. For those of you who are familiar with Vertex standard software, it looks much like the VX450 software. At the bottom, you have a help screen that changes by whatever field is activated. Now we're going to go ahead and set up our programming for each of our channels in the RF list. First, we're going to activate our RF list by using spacebar, enter, or double click with our mouse on the number. That will change that list black instead of gray. That means that list is active and can be programmed. Next, you're going to select A for analog operations, and for now that it's 2013 North America, we're going to set our narrowband, and after that we'll type in our tags, which is basically the channel's names, and then you have your RF frequencies. Notice that they're all the same for all 3 channels, and then we'll program in the sub-audibles. This should all be pretty much a review for the majority of you. On this next step, we're going to go ahead and register our RF list in our group list. Okay. As you can see here, our RF group lists is assigned to each channel on the channel selector knob. Channel 1 is selected and is utilizing list 1 over here in the RF list. Channel 2 is using list 2. Channel 3 is using list 3. If you do not assign these RF lists to the channels, you will not, when you go to write it into the radio, you will only have one channel. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and set up MDC 1200. First we're going to set MDC common, then MDC 1200 ANI, then the call list, and then lastly we'll go in and show how to set MDC in a signaling system. Keep in mind that you cannot use ANI and signaling system because signaling system has its own ANI embedded in it. Alright. So we're going to first go in and set up our MDC common. This will be done by clicking on signaling, MDC 1200, MDC 1200 common, as you see highlighted, and that will bring up this window here. In this window, we're going to set our primary ID as 221, which would be one of our teachers, and then we're going to set up our group ID of 102, which is our group ID of our teachers. Okay. Then you click OK, and you're now going to want to set up your MDC 1200 ANI. So you see that is located on this button here. When you click on it, this window will pop up, and you're going to want to first select MDC for your ANI type, and then you're going to want to select which MDC 1200 ANI call you want to send out as your ANI ID. Okay, which we will now show how to set up your call. And your MDC 1200 call list is located under signaling, MDC 1200, then MDC 1200 call. Once you've clicked on that, it'll bring up your MDC call list. And as you can see, you can enter in all the appropriate IDs of your system. And make sure that the system 1 is checked. You also may type in the tags as well. And this is what the ANI is referencing to, this list here. Alright, after this you will click OK, and we'll go ahead and look at setting MDC 1200 signaling systems. That's located here. You have a click on here, and you have a pull down. You want to select MDC system, and then you're going to want to pick which system that you want. Once you've done this, you will then lose the ANI checkbox. Okay. Alright, well, so far we've gone ahead and achieved the following communications. We have channel 1 as admin, channel 2 is teachers, channel 3 is maintenance. And each operator can utilize that channel to communicate amongst everybody within their group. Alright, now we're going to look at this same system. Now we're going to do it in digital. As you can see, we got the users and transmit receive frequencies are all the same. But now you're going to notice we have color code, which is 1 through 15. There is no actual color. For this exercise, I selected 10 for the color code. And you'll notice that each of the groups use the same color code. The color code only identifies which repeater. So in a way it does take the place of the sub-audible, but not by itself. In addition, you'll also use your group IDs to divide up your channels. Alright. Next is your private IDs. As you can see, each individual has been assigned an ID. And now you have a group ID. Alright, now you'll notice with my numbering system I use 1001, 1002 and 1003. So 1000 is identifying that as my user groups. 2000 is identifying my private or individual IDs. Okay. Now, additionally, in the private ID, you'll notice 100 matches the 1 in the group ID. So you have 2101, 2102, 2103. Those are all part of the 1001 group. And you'll notice the 2200 IDs match that of the 1002 ID of the teacher group, to show that that's all 5 teachers of the group. This allows you for expandability to your system without having to rewrite an entire program file for the radio. And we have, in addition, we have an all call. As you can see, the all call is the exact same ID for everything. This is a DMR standard, 16,777,215 is the ID for an all call. Then lastly, for privacy, I selected 115 for our privacy. We have the option of setting it between 1 and 256. And we're just doing basic privacy. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and talk about programming the radio. First, we're going to have to load the contacts, then the receive group list, the digital common. After that, we'll program the RF list, and then register the RF list to the group list. As you can see, there's more steps involved, but you have more benefits from operating in digital. You have better audio quality, true privacy for one-to-one calls, and when you're operating through a repeater, you can have 2 conversations instead of 1 at the same time when you're in analog mode. So in analog mode, you have just 1 group talking at a time. In digital, you can actually have literally 2 different groups programmed up to talk at the same time. And we'll see in this exercise. Alright, we're going to start off with loading contacts. Start off by clicking on digital, then contact list / receive group list. That will bring this window here up. But for right now, we're not interested in the entire contact and receive group list. We're only concerned about the contact list. So we're going to just look at this part. Okay. First thing we're going to want to do is set up our transmit ID type. And by doing that, you can have a pull down, which gives you these selections, either group, private, or an all call. And you can set that appropriately for each one of your contacts. As you can see, we've got started off with, and we're going to select group. Next, we're going to go ahead and program each of our IDs. As you can see, our group ID is 1001. Then 2101 is our individual, 2102, 2103, and so on for our additional groups of teachers and maintenance and the individuals underneath each. Lastly, you'll see that there's all calls set up for 16,777,215 for an ID. And it's grayed out. The system automatically selects that. Okay. Keep in mind, admin 1 for this exercise is our principal. In addition, we're going to set up a private call so the teachers can contact the principal in case something comes up. Alright. Alright, now we're going to go to the other side, which is the receive group list. Okay. Now first off, we're going to want to select our receive group list for this exercise. We're going to start with receive group list 1, and we're going to want to select our contact list. And we'll do that by click space or enter, and it'll bring up this contact list. Now notice that the contact list is not a complete list. It only shows the groups within the contact list because this is a receive group list. You cannot receive just an individual contact. Okay, so for this receive group list 1, we're going to select group number 1. Once you've done that, it'll automatically populate your tag to be admin. Okay, and that would be for receive group list 1. In addition, we're going to set up a receive group list 2, 3, and 4. 2 and 3 are for our other groups, and 4 is for our all calls. You'll notice that we put each group that we're going to be talking to, we can also hear on this channel. Okay. Now that that's set up, we're going to want to go ahead and set up our digital common. That will be done by first clicking on digital, then digital common, and we'll bring this window up. We're going to start off and enter our radio ID. Once again, it's 2201, our first teacher. And we're going to make sure that private call is checked so we can do communications with the principal. Alright, after that's selected, we'll go ahead and click OK. And now we're going to go ahead and program the RF list. Once again, like we discussed earlier, to activate each row, we're going to have to double click space or hit enter to change that line black instead of gray, and that way the RF list becomes active. After doing that, we want to select digital, so we have D in that column. And of course, since we're in digital mode, we're going to be in narrowband, so we have N for this column. And then we'll put our tags for each of our channels, and you'll notice we have admin, teachers, maintenance. We have 2 all-call channels and a principal. Now, because of our repeater in place, we can have 2 simultaneous conversations at the same time. However, an all-call cannot go over both time slots. So there has to be an all-call for each time slot. That's why we have an all-call 1 and an all-call 2. And lastly is our principal, which is our individual call for our teachers to contact the principal if anything comes up. Now we have our frequencies, same as before. And then we enter our color code, which we discussed, which just basically identifies that our repeater is color code 10. Next, we're going to set our time slots. You'll notice that both teachers and all call 2 are set to time slot 2. With that, my thought was, since there's 5 teachers, 3 admin, and 3 maintenance, since there's so many teachers, they're going to probably want to have their own time slot because there's probably going to be more activity on that group with that many more users. Okay, and then like I said, because the all-call does not work on both time slots, there's an all-call on time slot 1 and there's an all-call on time slot 2. Now, lastly, our principal channel, you'll notice that it is on time slot 1. That's because the principal is in the admin group, which is in time slot 1. Here we're going to set the receive group list for each of our RF lists. You'll notice that receive group list 1, 2, and 3 are for each of our groups, our admin, teachers, maintenance. And then 4 is used for each of our all calls because the group lists can be duplicated even though they're on different time slots. And lastly, you'll notice that the principal is using receive group list 1 because the principal is part of the admin group. Alright. And then we have privacy confirmation. We have this checked because we want to make sure that any private calls we receive are confirmed and acknowledged private calls. And here we have the contact list. As you can see, we have contact lists. When you double click on it, it brings up the entire contact list, and we select the group for each of our RF lists. So we have group 1 for list number 1. We have contact number 5, which is our second group for our teachers, and 11 is our maintenance group for our third list. And then we went through and used 15 for both 4 and 5 for our all call. Then lastly, since the last channel is just a private call, we selected 2, which is admin 1. And what this basically does is sets a default for our PTT. So when you go to assign this to a specific switch on your radio, when you press the PTT, that's who you're going to get. For display models, we have menu functions and you can change who you're going to key up. But for a non-display model, when you press that PTT button, you don't have a list to select who you're going to talk to. So you have to have that set up. Alright, since we now have the RF group list programmed up, we're going to go ahead and register the RF group list to the channel lists. Alright, and like before, we have channel 1 through 6, and we're going to register it by adding the list number in the list column. You should see that list 1 matches list 1 over in the RF list section. So channel 1 is RF list 1, channel 2 is RF list 2, and so on. Once you've selected them, the tags auto-populate. Alright. With this exercise, you're able to program your radios for 3 channels of group calls, 1 being admin 1, 2 being teachers, 3 being your maintenance. Then you have 2 announcement channels, 1 of all call 1 and 1 of all call 2. And after that, you had a 6th channel, which would be a private call from any one of your teachers to the principal, which is admin 1. Now that we've gotten that done, we're going to go ahead and talk about additional systems we have. The additional system features we have is scan, privacy, emergency, and arts 2. And we're going to go over programming each of them. We'll start off with setting up scan. We'll do that by first going to channels and select scan settings. That'll cause this window to pop up. And for this window, you have several settings, revert and such, but our main concern is a priority 2 scan be checked. So we could use this priority 2 option in the radio. Now what we're going to want to do is set a button press so we can turn on and off scan. Do that by clicking on common, then key function. With key function, you have this familiar screen which has a pull down of all 4 of our scan features. These scan features is the same that we've had for quite some time. Scan, group scan, dual watch, and follow me scan. You select which one is appropriate for your radio to your button. After doing that, we're going to go ahead and set up the individual scan features within the radio. First, by selecting the proper group, Then checking whether we want group scan or not. Here we check by each channel that we want to be able to scan in this group scan, and then you can set a priority 2 to this group scan. In addition, you can select standard group or group scan, or you can also set up an auto scan. This way, when you turn on the radio, it's automatically in scan as soon as you go to that channel. So channel 1 would automatically have scan enabled without using a button press. Now we're going to go ahead and set up privacy. Privacy is done by clicking on digital, then digital common, and this familiar digital common screen will pop up again. And we'll select basic for your privacy type. And for this exercise, we set our basic key to 115. In 2.0 release, we will have enhanced version of privacy. Next, we're going to click on common and key function. This will allow us to set up a button press to turn on and off privacy. And you can do that by selecting privacy from your pull downs for one of your buttons. Now that we've gone ahead and set up the buttons and set up the codes, now we need to assign which channels we want to have privacy. And as you can see in our RF list, PVC Y is our privacy, and that when you space double click or press enter, it brings up this window. And from there you can select whether you want it off, key on, which means by pressing a button on the radio to turn on and off, or have encryption turn on upon power up of the radio, which is power on, or the last option is number 3, which is on, which basically as soon as you come to that channel, it is strapped for security. You cannot disable it. Now we're going to go over emergency setup. First off, you're going to go click on common, then emergency, and then this window here will pop up, and you're going to want to go over these 4 features here. These 4 features here are for analog and digital operations. After setting them appropriately, you will then select the digital tab, and this window will pop up, and you can go through and set these 4 features are your basic features for digital emergency. First one, you can enable or disable emergency. After that, you can select which group and which channel you want the emergency to go out on. And then lastly, you have what type of emergency mode you want, whether it's an alarm or a call or whatever. Now that you've set that up, by clicking OK, go ahead and set up a button for emergency. This is done by clicking on common and then selecting key function. After doing that, this window here will pop up. Once again, completely familiar. And you select from one of the pull downs from one of the buttons, emergency. Alright, now that we've got that set up, go over ARTS2. Okay, ARTS2, ARTS is basically an auto range transponder system, so you can tell when the radio is out of range of your system. And we can do this by setting up the following steps. Going through setting up MDC common, MDC 1200 call list. Then after that, you'd set up the miscellaneous ARTS2, and then you'd set up ARTS2 in the actual RF list for the channel. And since we've already gone through and programmed MDC common and call list, there's no point in going back over that again. It's fairly simple. So we're going to go ahead and skip right to step 3, and we'll set the miscellaneous for ARTS2. You can do that by clicking on Common, then selecting Miscellaneous, and this window here will pop up. Once this window pops up, you're going to want to select Miscellaneous 2 tab, and it'll switch over to this view. And your main concern are these first three options here. Your arts mode, where you can set it for transmit, receive, or transmit and receive. Arts beep, you can turn that on or off, whether you want an audible beep. And then the last item is arts transmit time, whether it's 25 seconds or 55 seconds for the polling. Okay. You also have squelch tail eliminator as such in this screen as well. Now we're going to want to go ahead and enable Arts 2 in the channel. First, keep in mind that the channel should be analog, since we're using MDC operation. You cannot have MDC on a digital channel. However, in 2.0 release, we will have Arts 2 available in digital operation. And then under Arts, you can see that we've selected MDC. When you select MDC from this list, once you've double clicked or press enter, this window will pop up. You select MDC 1200, and once you've done that, this old familiar ANI screen pops up, and you'll then select what call you're going to be using from your call list that you've set up previously for your ANI that's going to go out with your Arts 2. Alright, now that we've set up all those additional systems, lastly I'd like to go over any additional documentation we have available here at Vertex Standard. All of it can be located on VSOL, businessonline.vertexstandard.com, and it's located under the Resource Center, Technical Information, and under the EVX series radios. We have manuals, programming softwares, technical bulletins, and quick reference guides to cover each of the features we covered in this presentation and a few additional ones. I think there's a total of 8 of them total. Okay. In closing, if you have any further comments, please feel free to contact me. My number is 1-800-283-7839. That'll get you to our call center, and then you can select our tech support by 2, and you can talk to myself or any one of my agents. Alright? Well, you have yourself a nice day. Well, thank you.